All right, Facebook fans, if we've got any out there. Yep. Hello, Facebook fans, if we got any out there. We're hopefully we're coming through loud and clear. If we have any of you out there that can detect us, how about sending us a text? Y'all are much more sophisticated than we are, or at least than I am. I see one viewer. Send us a text to say whether you can hear us, see us. And we'll kind of get going. Following a live story, well, I guess it's not, that's the ironic choice of words. A shoot, four people shot at the Dollar General down on Dolphin Island Parkway, kind of near the cemetery, and kind of near the methadone clinic, if it's still there. And Chase, were they anybody killed?
I don't know yet. I haven't found any more news out
Yeah, the
about
police
it.
still are out there.
Pull up the feed and see if it's still alive or not.
If the shooting at the congressional baseball practice, the Republican congressional baseball practice, doesn't show how a gun, Alexandria, you can have a gun, but it's still somewhat difficult because it's across the street, across the river from Washington. But, had those two Capitol police officers not been there, a guy with an SKS that I understand did not have a scope managed to, well, Scalise was near death, and I suspect he lost a lot of blood and may have some brain damage. I'm just sheer speculation there because it said it hit his pelvis, and that doesn't usually put you in critical condition unless you lose a lot of blood. That's one of the places when all else fails, we tell people to shoot for the pelvis because, and not that guy was a lucky shot, I'm sure. But if somebody's charging you, you shoot in the pelvis and it just breaks down their skeletal structure. They can't keep running. If you've shot them 3 or 4 times in the chest and they're high on whatever their choice of drugs are, shoot for the pelvis. But that kind of thing has always been endemic in some countries, the Middle East, for instance. I mean, that's just how things operated. The amazing thing is there's several laws on the books and have been on the books for 150 years that people were prosecuted for in the 1960s, 1970s, and in the 1980s. 18 U.S. Code 241 is one, for instance, that says if you conspire with another person, and believe me, 100 people don't show up at the same time at Berkeley to protest and become violent when Milo, can't pronounce his last name, shows up to speak. They have to talk to one another, and that's a conspiracy. And it even adds if 2 or more people go about the streets in disguise. And the essence of it is if their goal or effective is to deprive someone of a right guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution. Well, last time I looked, freedom of speech was, and it was originally started, it was called the Anti-Ku Klux Klan Act. I mean, the old Ku Klux Klan, 1866. And it is a felony punishable by 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Right now, what's happening to these people, if they're even caught, is they're getting tickets and community service by a city judge. What happened there in Washington, D.C. During the inauguration was a classic example. I think I've got it on one of the videos I posted. It is outrageous. You have 2 people, that dress like PLO wannabes throwing rocks, or ninja wannabes throwing rocks, completely disguised in black. What did you see that? So, that ought to be prosecuted under that statute. You prosecute 50 people and give them a 10-year term. That's going to stop. Now, part of the problem is that Trump doesn't have his U.S. attorneys in place, but you can prosecute it out of Washington. That can be done. So that's a bad strategic move. But Jeff Sessions needs to inform him about that, or somebody needs to. As I said the other day, maybe he needs somebody more a little akin to John Mitchell, who was pretty ruthless doing that, and not a Boy Scout like Jeff. So, and the problem is it desensitizes people to political violence. People think it's normal. The next thing you know, you've got a whole group of people that aren't going to go vote because of fears of political violence, or aren't going to run for office. And that's just not a river we want to cross over. It's just amazingly outrageous. And if y'all noticed the past few months, most of the Black Lives Matter problems, it's been a bunch of white college kids. So, that's where it's coming from. I don't know whether they're doing it for fun or whether their Marxist professors gave them an assignment, or maybe have truly brainwashed them. I don't know. But it needs to stop fast. I was toying with the idea of, problem is it'd be too long, of putting together back for the past year a compilation of various violence that has taken place. I mean, had some in Springfield, Illinois. Well, it kind of started in its modern form with the Occupy movement. Now, if you're just going to have a sit-in and not going to block people's paths, that's fine. That's a protest. When you're physically keeping people from going to work or physically blocking the street, that's violence. And some of these folks don't know the difference, and that's a real problem. Can you check on that? One of a case that you may not know about, you know about the Jeremiah Yanz's case involving Geronimo Yanz's up in Minnesota that set off the kind of the first or second big riots. He was acquitted. The officer was the end of last week, I guess. There was another one that the police officer worked for the University of Cincinnati. And kind of to preface it, the university is spread out and they have a medical center like we do that is not in the best part of town, but they have a fair number of students that live there. And he got directions from the college, university, to make sure you're patrolling those areas where the students live near the medical center, and kind of like the whole concept of fixing broken windows, stop people for minor offenses, no taillights, that type thing. And the theory of that is, if you do that, then people that don't live around there will stop driving through there. They had tremendous number of burglaries, rapes, assaults, etc. Well, he does that. He stops someone for no front. It's a state that requires a front license plate. Did you find anything?
Oh, what's the name again?
Ray, Officer Ray, Tensing. And you ought to put that in trial and it'll come up. This would be their fourth day of deliberations. This second trial, it had been a hung jury 6 months ago. And so he stops the guy. And of course, the guy's not in his car. Of course, it's a black-white issue. He's not in his car. He has no driver's license. Now, did he shoot him when the guy went in his glove compartment 2 or 3 times looking for his driver's license? No, he didn't do that. He was very respectful to the man. Finally, he asked, level with me, have you got a warrant out for you? Are you barred from driving? And maybe the man says, I don't have a drive. No, I don't have a driver's license or something. So he said, well, I can't let you drive. You need to get out. and the officer starts opening his door. He slams it back, and the officer's hands are in the car. Well, this guy hits the gas, and I tried slowing it down even by the quarter of a second. It's a blur. The officer fires once, killing the driver, and he flies on up, hits a telephone pole. Within 5 seconds, the officers run to the telephone pole. Another officer's there. He tells the same story then that he told at trial. I thought I was going to die. I thought he was going to drag me. And that happens fairly frequently. It happens enough to where police officers are aware of it. The problem is in the state of Ohio, they have a law that's self-defense law that's different than every other law in every state. And every other state, as it is here, if you have a reasonable belief that your life is you're in imminent fear of your life, and that belief is reasonable, you can use deadly force. In Ohio, once you have raised that issue, self-defense, it's up to you to prove that by preponderance of the evidence, meaning 50% plus one. In Alabama and every other state, once you have raised that, it's still up to the state that you did not act in self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't see how their law is constitutional. It's an aberration against English common law, against American common law, against the law of every other state. I'm just amazed. And even with that, the jury in the first trial deadlocked. Did you see anything?
All I've seen is they're gone to deliberate, and that's all I've seen.
Well, there were citations that said that the mayor of Cincinnati told the prosecutor, you need to prosecute him or they're going to burn this city down. Now, I don't know. I didn't hear it. I don't know whether he said it. But if that is true, that means it was a pure political prosecution, kinds, and should never happen.
They're still.
Did he tell them to come back tomorrow? Or are they still deliberating tonight?
They're going to have it deliberated tomorrow. They're going to go into the 5th day.
Everybody's different, but my rule of thumb was whatever time it took to try the case, if a jury kept saying they were deadlocked. If they don't say they're deadlocked, they can deliberate as long as they wanted. But if a case took, let's say, 3 days to try, I wouldn't let them go. I'd make them keep deliberating for a day and a half, just roughly half the time it took to try the case. But in England, because you're running a real risk by forcing them to stay there, the appellate courts will quite frequently say they kept telling you they were deadlocked and you wouldn't let them go. And that becomes a problem after a while. But in England, the judges wouldn't let them leave because you actually swear an oath to come back with a verdict. They wouldn't let them leave. They would deprive them of food, water, even the bathroom. And until nobody wanted to be on a jury until they came back with a verdict. And sometimes you'd have each hour a trial coming back with a verdict. And of course, every crime that was a felony in England at one time was a capital offense, death. And so they were turning them out. But of course, the mere fact that you still had to keep trying people, because they had a capital offense for stealing a loaf of bread at one time. So, I don't know that you're ever going to stop someone hungry from stealing a loaf of bread if 9 out of 10 people get away with it. But I sure wouldn't want to be hanged, which was the general way. Of course, treason was the worst offense because you were hanged, drawn, and quartered, and that's just awful, diabolical. But of course, we've gone to the opposite extreme. We put people to sleep just like we do our pets after 30 years, which is amazing. I'm going to show you all, as we've got you here, captive audience, so to speak. I guess you can click off anytime. This is a Mauser, and it is actually one of the Mausers that they sold to Turkey, and it's got the crescent on there, the Fertile Crescent sign, and so it's a little different, it's a little shorter, and I should have familiarized myself for it, but it was made at the it's actually a Czech made, and of course the Germans had companies in Czechoslovakia, but it fires. I mean, it's actually in pretty good shape. You know, this company, like a lot of older companies, kept an extra firing pin in the buttstock, which is nice, because you know, if you need another firing pin, and if you ever want you know, an old war relic, the Mausers, I mean, this is one in particular. I mean, you can get them for, well, this one was probably $100, but I had to clean it up, several $100s, and they will last forever. You can still buy ammunition. That ammunition is awesome. I mean, now it does have a recoil. Now, of course, the first time I used that, I inspected it pretty well. I had it in my gun vise and had a nylon cord about 20 feet long on the trigger, so I could stand back in case it blew up. But that's what I always do after I've worked on a gun. Just standard procedure. But it hit the target, which was really amazing. But they're really neat guns. I mean, if you're just going to hang them on the wall. And it's when near the end of the Soviet Union, remember when Yeltsin stopped the counter coup or whatever was taking place, the Soviet or the communists wanted to retake the country, stood in front of the truck. They said, you know, of course, no guns in Russia, strictly banned. They said it was amazing how many people pulled old World War II rifles out from under their bed. They were ready to stand with them with their rifles. They had squirreled them away all the way back from the war. So you never know. But I saw a film the other day from the Czech Republic, and of course, they've strict gun laws like everywhere else. And by the way, Europe, not taking into account Islamic terrorism, they've had more mass shootings, taking in more people than we have since 1990. So I'll give you one that y'all would remember. Remember in Norway on the island where the guy, I think he killed 30 or 40 people. I mean, it was tragic. It's a lot easier to kill people when you're the only one with a gun. But anyway, this, I guess it was a satirical ad, but it was meant to wag their finger at the European Union, because the president of Czechoslovakia has basically just about walled off the country and said, we're not taking any refugees. Well, this kind of ad they made said, refugees are not welcome, and we don't care what the EU says. We've got guns. Now, it fuzzed at everybody's faces, but everyone had some kind of rifle kind of pointing it like at the camera. And it was a collection of every high-tech thing you can imagine. So people will get them if they need them. But if I was in one of those countries, especially France, I would sure want them.
If you were looking to smart guns?
Yes. Well, I don't think the technology is there yet. Mm-hmm. And you know what in theory a smart gun is it can read your either fingerprint pattern, your biometric, whatever, and you're the only one that can fire it. And the problem is they're just not at the accuracy. They just don't work all the time. And you got to have something that is close to 100%. I mean, no gun is 100% a regular gun, but you got to have it at that kind of accuracy. And they were up like in the 80s. And so think about a gun that doesn't function 20% of the time. And then the other problem is there are plenty of times where you have a backup gun, you're down, wounded, and maybe a partner needs an extra gun. He can't use your gun.
I know one thing they've been looking at doing with smart guns recently is kind of a sensor, an IR sensor or something that would, within proximity,
Yeah,
almost
it's just
takes
going
the
to have.
safety off, and that's all it does.
It's just going to have to. It's going to have to. In time will cure it, and it's going to have to be get the. Of course, mass production will get the price down, and it's going to have to be where you can also sell it, exchange it, and it can be changed.
Mhm.
And I think that's where people are going to be wary that somehow the government's going to control it, and that if rather than the manufacturer or whatever, and if I legally sell it to you, some entity is going to block that sale.
There are blockchains or technologies that are decentralized.
Mhm.
Earlier today, I bring it up because I was just looking at one called Trigger
Mhm.
for smart guns, and it's a decentralized idea that uses a coding in a more encrypted way.
That would be much
penetrate.
better than Big Brother being in charge.
So no one's in charge of it except for the owners.
Yeah.
So,
Than anything is to get a low cost. Of course, a lot of people wouldn't like it. A low cost, easy to install alcohol sensor in every car, and not one where you had to blow in drive. One, they have some that monitor you continuously by iris scan and breath sniffer when you're driving, and just gives you 10 seconds and shuts you off, just powers you down basically. And that would save thousands of lives a year. I mean, the gun might save 100, car thousands.
there's so many more car accidents than
anything
else.
But the few that they have that they force people to put, it's thousands of dollars. But if you had something like that you could put in every car for 300 or 400, that'd be the way to go.
Almost built into the dash nowadays. Those
Yeah.
computers are so smart.
Oh yeah, and but it's one of those things. In this state, do we really have the will to do it? The state makes money selling the alcohol. Then they make money off of the taxes from the alcohol. You may go to a bar that has a police officer that works for some kind of entity of the government. He almost walks you to your car knowing you're drunk, and then you drive off. Oh, in the gas that has taxes on it. So
the benefits of having the taxes we get from the federal, just for make sure each state says the drinking age is 21.
Oh yeah, well that was such a holdup by them saying we're going to withhold taxes that you all collected. And I mean, come on, that your citizens pay. I'm not saying it's bad necessarily, but if it was good, the states would have done it themselves. They did the same thing. Well, they got away with it then, but there was a rebellion on the 55 speed limit. I'm sure everybody going 55 saves gasoline, but it wastes time since the interstates were designed, for a higher speed. And it's just not their business. We don't need them making those kind of decisions. Chase, would you if anybody's into open carry, believe me, that's fine with me. But you ought to do it smart. And one of the smart ways to do it, we've talked on the show about retention holsters. Wear at least a class 2 retention holster and wear a good belt. Now, this kind is actually made by 511. It's combination, it looks a decent dress belt. It's a combination of leather, and I think it's got some Kevlar strands in it. And I mean, everything can be cut through, but nobody's going to snatch this belt from you and have it break. The 511, is a big brand, so a lot of police type gear, and you can get them 100 different designs. But have your holster on that. Then if somebody can't, they're not going to know how to get your retention holster, your gun out of your retention holster. But so they'll just snatch. And if you've got, a trendy cloth belt or something like that, it may very well break. So now, if you don't like that kind of thing, something cooler for the summer, I think this is also 511. This is also a 511 belt, but it's some type of nylon. It's not going to break either. I mean, I used to know the break-in strengths of them, but I don't. Nice thing about this is, you know, you can wear them with short pants. Heavier here, same people make it, but it's a little thicker. But of course, it means it's stronger. And that's another. This is a leather belt the Amish make, actually. That I got this one in a brown one on Amazon. I can tell you, it's not going to break. You know, just made with their technology. If you see a thick, and that's not Chinese leather. You know, it's real leather. But what that tells a police officer, especially if some areas are real prone to hassle open carriers. But when you've got your pistol in a retention holster with a police type or good quality belt, it's saying to people, you know, I'm responsible. I know the hazards of somebody trying to, you know, I think somebody that would try to snatch your gun's a crazy person, but there are plenty of crazy people out there. And so it says, I know a little bit. I've seen police officers that have, you know, not been doing what they're supposed to. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. And it's just like us legally, if you're walking down the street and they don't have any reasonable suspicion to believe you've done anything, they just see you with a pistol, they can ask you what your favorite ice cream is. You're not under any obligation to answer. The only thing you're obligated to answer is your name. And even though the Alabama code says you're to provide your name and where you're going and where you've been, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says your name only. But like I said, they can ask anything. How tall are you? You know, but you don't have to answer that, and they can't force you to. But it's so much easier to tell them your name but do it in an introduction. Hey, officer, I am Rusty Johnston. And, you know, that diffuses a lot of situations instead of F you, I don't have to tell you anything. That just kind of raises the level of everything, especially at a traffic stop. The way court cases work on traffic is probably 95 out of 100 people plead guilty by either paying the ticket or coming in and paying the ticket. So the police don't show up at most court dates. But if you're the one that cuts loose with the profanity, believe me, he's going to make sure he's there. If he doesn't show up, depending on the judge, most of them will give the police 2 times. But being on the judge, your ticket's going to get thrown out because the case can't be prosecuted without a prosecuting witness there. And so, you know, I've thrown out marijuana cases before when the police officer didn't show up. And in fact, on that one, I won't mention the municipality, but he didn't show up twice. And a municipality, it was an appeal because misdemeanor marijuana cases are tried in the cities first. The mayor of that city wrote me how disappointed he was that I threw the case out. And I said, well, you don't know the facts. I was so disappointed because your officer didn't show up here 2 times, you know, and I hope you'll, and of course I copied the entire city council with that one. Wanted to let them know, you know, who was responsible for what.
Got an update on the shooting.
Okay.
So say official says it was a home invasion on an elderly man. Suspect shot him with a shotgun. He returned fire and shot all 3 of them.
Whoa.
2 of the suspects hopped in the car and fled to Dollar General. And then all were taken to the hospital.
Going to get medical supplies. So the old man, there was a you didn't hear that, home invasion down around DIP in the general area of Pinecrest Cemetery, let's say, the library down there. And apparently in the home invasion, the old man was shot first. He returned fire and shot 3 home invaders with what I always tell people isn't the best weapon, but he used it properly, a shotgun. They fled to the Dollar General store, which is the logical place to flee to. And that's where they were captured.
Well, the invaders used a shotgun. I don't know what.
Oh, you're not sure what the old man used. Okay, the invaders used a shotgun.
They used a shotgun, which is probably why he was able to.
Probably so. He probably had a carbine. One of the carbines. Yeah. That is interesting.
You don't beat 3 people with.
And so
they had shotgun.
And it must have happened 3 or 4 today.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't last night. Because you typically think of those 8 o'clock at night kind of things.
It probably happened right between 5 and 6, somewhere in that range.
Broad daylight, in other words.
Right in between one of the down spells of rain.
Y'all remember too, just because somebody knocks on your door doesn't mean you have to go to it. Because generally, most home invaders have a connection with the person that lives there. There's some random people, but that is a real serious crime, and there's a good chance you're going to get shot. Why would you smash into a home if you don't know what's there? And I mean a connection. It could be your daughter or granddaughter's ex-boyfriend, and he knows you keep gold coins there, or you have some problem and you have narcotics there. And so they know what's in the house. They know you might live alone. And so that's what they're coming for. The worst case was over in Pensacola. If you remember, there were the man that had all of the mentally disabled children that he adopted, and one of his employees thought he had a safe full of money and all this, and they just slaughtered the people. But it could also be something as innocent as a workman at your house laying tiles in your house. I had a sex offender who was doing that, and that's when he would scope the houses out. Now, he wasn't a home invader, but I mean, he could have been. He did other stuff. But it's usually somebody that has a reason to be there. The dumb home invaders are the ones that just, crash through, not knowing that you're listening to the Armed Alabama show and you're armed to the teeth and ready. Because that would be crazy to do that. But so that's it's amazing how many big unknown to them, like it's the big unknown to you, unless they're really professionals, and there are not many of them, and have really had you under surveillance, and there are not a lot of them. Now, I'm not saying if you're not, a gold coin collector, somebody like that they have some professional has kept their eye on, but Mobile tends not to attract those. But, if I was a criminal, I might, and if I knew who owned a certain jewelry store, that might be a person that I kept a watch on, and it wouldn't be the home I invaded, it'd be the jewelry store. What time did they close? And that would be the time I'd hit the store. But, it's so hard to get rid of stolen merchandise, even diamonds. But criminals don't realize that sometimes, and your life to them is about as valuable as us stepping on a cockroach. They don't have the same empathy. They cannot have the same empathy. I've seen it, and they don't have the same feelings. We were speaking earlier about the cases. If y'all remembered, I mentioned this on the show the other night, shooting in Tulsa last fall. Officer Betty Shelby got a call from she runs up on a Tahoe or some really high-end car running in the middle of a 2-lane highway, just running, nobody in it. And she had not heard anything about the 911 calls that had come in, where at least 3 had come in saying, this car's running, I almost hit it. And then one of them said, there's a crazy man that just jumped out of this car. She didn't hear any of that. So she goes up to the car, looks around, and what in the world? And well, this guy runs out of the bushes. And he says, get away from the car, it's going to explode. There's a bomb in it. Well, she can tell pretty quick. That's probably not true, but he just is acting erratically. Well, that's when he wouldn't follow any of her commands. He wouldn't put his hands up. Then he puts them up, all this kind of stuff. Another police officer joins her. They both got their guns out on him. Put your hands up, keep them away from your, keep them away from your pockets. I can't remember the whole sequence. Helicopter circling, makes the comment, he's not doing anything he's supposed to do. The other one says, he's a bad dude. He must be on drugs. The second she fires a shot, he got near the car. She says she thought he was going for something in the car. The guy with the taser, her comrade, other police officer, had a taser. He fires the taser. So obviously they both perceive some kind of threat. Rather than investigating it for some time to determine if they had a case, Oklahoma is one of the states that doesn't require a grand jury to indict someone for a felony. The DA can charge you with a felony. DA charged her within a week. And of course that, she was just pulled through the ringer, insane. Her last marriage was all in the paper. Well, she was acquitted in about 4 hours last month, I think. But, this isn't a big secret. There are a lot of books. This is a good book, Use of Force Investigations, that tell you the procedures that, for instance, when she was interviewed by her superior about this, she was crying hysterically about what happened. The story was, she loves shooting black men. That's crazy, and I'm sure, and it wasn't an act, believe me. And when you drill down to it, it's a tragedy. But, and at first they said Terrence Crutcher, I think the man's name was, he was an upstanding family man. Well, he had 8 children. He wasn't married to the mother. He'd served a little time in the penitentiary. He wasn't an upstanding. I'm not saying he deserved to be shot. He certainly didn't. But he wasn't an upstanding family man. But one of the best books out there is Heather McDonald's The War on Cops. It doesn't mean just the street violence. It means the attitudinal change. But because of her book and a lot of other things, mainly the shootings last summer, and people that have any sense analyzing it, that the police are not, if anything, they're being more careful and have been for years with black suspects. The support for police is the highest it's been since Gallup, if you go by Gallup, since they started taking measurements. Listen, they all do something wrong. I've had at least, somebody reminded me of a second one. 2, 1, treat me. I should have belted him. But I wasn't going to win. He had a gun. He was a lot stronger than I was. And I wasn't a judge then. What good would it have been pulling my lawyer card or anything else? Just wait for court. That's the way to handle it. That court is not held by the side of the road. That's why we build expensive buildings to have them in there. And if you're ever treated in a way, first of all, there's something called a clean hands doctrine. Now, that really applies in civil cases, but it applies really in life. If you treat somebody badly, don't be shocked if they treat you badly. And if you have treated somebody badly and impolitely, don't go complaining about it, because the way you treated them is going to come out too, and you're going to look just as bad. So, a legislator in Texas who said, now he was pulled over going 120 miles an hour. In Texas, too, you have government officials get free license plates, which is really dangerous because it marks you as a government official. If you're going to be assassinated, you don't want to have a tag on there that says, they have tags that say circuit judge. Well, that's insane. They could have given me a free tag if they wanted, but don't put circuit judge on it. But anyway, this state legislator, 120 something miles an hour, a deputy sheriff pulls him over. He's very respectful. He just says, you're going so fast, I'm just afraid you're going to kill somebody. And plus, you've got the official tag on your car. You're just advertising to everybody, I'm a public official, I'm breaking the law. And there wasn't any argument. A week later, when he's in the states, I think he's a state senator, he says, I was treated so rudely by this deputy sheriff in so-ever county, he may as well have called me boy and a slave. Well, the sheriff pulls out the video of the incident and made him look like a total liar because nothing different incidents. So, don't be saying things like that. I don't know why lying has gotten so prolific these days, but it sure has. We need lie detectors or polygraphers. If little secret, since we don't have a big crowd tonight, if you're ever charged with a serious offense, there are a couple of polygraph experts that you can get your lawyer to send you to one, and you take the polygraph test. And if you're telling the truth, the police and the district attorney's office will accept the results of those polygraph experts. They'll drop the charges.
Normally they don't, right?
Well, they wouldn't if it was anybody. These are guys they use too. And they're not admissible in court, but to the law enforcement community, they have faith in them. And I mean, I made that proposal one time. A guy pled guilty to molesting his own child. I think maybe it was a stepchild. Then a year or two later, he filed a motion. Oh, that was I was forced to take that plea because the child was lying, and they had an affidavit from the child. She was prepared to testify. She'd made up the lie, and all this. And I said, before anybody said anything, I'll make you a deal. If you go have so-and-so do a polygraph and it comes back that there's no deceit, I will set aside the charges and release your client. He failed. So that was that. But of course, the assumption is, that's what a good lawyer does. I'm afraid lots are not doing that. But see, the point is, if your lawyer does it, he tells the polygraph guy, if he fails, don't write me a report. I'll just tell me how much it is. I'll send you a check. Then there's not a paper trail. The state never knows about it. State couldn't use it anyway. But it's like it never happened. But if he passes it, then you use it for negotiations, because the state has faith in them, at least the police and the prosecutors. And they don't want to waste their time. They want to get the real person that did it. So now don't assume if you're on a jury that any of this has happened, because I don't think very many people do that. But like I say, if you, depending on what kind of deal you can cut, it probably costs you $700 to $1,000. But if you're charged with, raping somebody, pretty small price to pay if you could end it before you're even taken before a grand jury. And I tell you, it's a small price to pay.
While we're sharing secrets, all the time when we're doing the stream, I always get people asking about those shirts.
Oh yeah, now, thank you. I was going to mention that. Okay, we're pushing. Patreon we reworked it, and we've got two very inexpensive levels for $5 a month, and everyone, and we got to get the notice of this out better, but everyone gets this Google Hangout every other week. But for $10 a month, you not only get the admission to the Google Hangout, you get a $30 gift certificate off one of our courses, and one of these shirts. Good. Is that a good picture? Yeah. We can probably get them in different colors, but it's going to be somewhat limited because of the seal on there. And it's that, whatever it's called. We would have called them nylon or rayon years ago, but they got a real high-tech name for them now. Since 511 and Under Armour started making shirts, they They got really expensive material. But anyway, you'll get the shirt, you'll get the $30 off, and then you'll get this chat. Now, we'll start selling them on the website anyway, and I don't know the individual price, but we're not planning on making much money off those shirts. But I've just got to get with the supplier, and I think he can handle us giving him the names and him just sending them out to you all. I mean, they're not going to be $50. I'm hoping we can sell them for $25. But I just have to get with him. I've been trying to work on the winning the NAPI awards, and that'd be, you know, on one hand, it's kind of silly because it's not scientific, but you know, on the other hand, it's kind of neat because we did nothing to get into the finals. That's what was interesting. That was a totally
good quality show.
Well, I know that was a fan-oriented vote because I didn't even know how to do it. So
look at it no different than a polygraph.
Well, that's right. That's right. Now, there's some scientific basis for the polygraph. There's some other tests that I can't say over the air that test for other things that are really diabolical. And but all of our sex offenders here, at least when I left, we would randomly polygraph them. Now they would agree, and see, they agree to that as a part of their probation. So nobody's forcing them to do anything. Hey, you want to go to the penitentiary, or we'll agree to probation, but one of the terms is that random polygraphing. And it's a fairly limited set of questions. Have you been, you know, one of the terms of sex offender probation is you can't be around anybody under 18 or 19. You can't have any internet access as pornography, and they can have, there are 2 or 3 services that filter all that out, you know, at the servers. And there are just 3 or 4 things like that. And those are the questions they're asked. And if they don't pass it, they got a problem, you know. And if you were doing it right, you would put the money into that type thing instead of checking to see where they live, because 85%, I think is the figure, either molest a member of their extended family or someone they know. They're not grabbing strangers that are going to elementary school down the street. I mean, that happens, and when it does, it's the worst kind, you know, non-stranger violence. But we waste a lot of money doing that, and I don't think we get the bang for the buck. We would with this. Go to the Colorado Sex Offender Board if you're interested. You'll see all the regulations, and they put the money in it. And one thing they don't do that we do, we force the sex offenders to pay for the cost of monitoring them. Well, most of them can't get a job, and it's just, the state ought to keep us safe from them, and, you know, whatever it takes. I'm for leaving them in the penitentiary, but the legislature won't do that, and that's the one that's responsible. And I'm for just leaving them there, but they're going to get out, and they're different degrees of dangerousness. The most dangerous are the stranger attacks. They are, you know, they're the most dangerous. They're the ones that ought to stay in forever. And the least dangerous are closer in age, opposite sex. You know, the 25-year-old teacher, even though everybody's gone berserk about teachers, and the, you know, the 15-year-old student. You know, those are the ones that, sounds horrible, but those are the least likely to repeat themselves, as opposed to that 70-year-old man that abducts or that molests a 10-year-old boy at the school down the street. Those are the ones that are really dangerous. We had 6.5 inches of rain here in Mobile, which means I know everybody has air conditioning, but the number one danger to guns is humidity, and ammunition is humidity. And I showed folks on the show one night, but I'll mention it again. If you keep a small stockpile of ammunition, and it's not dangerous, you know, people are afraid it's going to explode. It has to be in a contained a chamber of a gun. It have to be a steel box to explode. Having a box of ammunition there and a fire sweep, it might pop off, but it's probably not going to do that. It needs that. But one very effective way of doing that is, remember the old seal-a-mealers? You know, you get the meal and you seal soup up or you seal meat up in it. You get the thickest plastic sealant you can get, which I think is 4 mils, maybe 4.5. And you leave it in the box, put several boxes of ammunition in there and seal it. And then get you the plastic ammo cans, because they have a good O-ring around there. Put it in there along with some of the little decedent packs, kind of like you see in your medicine bottles, but you can buy those in a 100 bag, probably a nickel a piece. Throw those in there and then lock that down. And in 100 years, unless your house burned down, that ammunition is still going to be good. It'd probably be good for 100 years anyway. But the Army gets rid of their ammunition as surplus when 1 out of 1,000 there's a misfire, which is pretty low rate, and that's usually about 20 years. But you know, they're storing it. They're not doing what I'm telling you. They're still storing it good. But there's not a lot of people think there's a danger in keeping. And I'm not saying keep 20,000 rounds, but you ought to keep. If you're concerned about hurricanes or the future or just cost, and you've got a few guns, you probably ought to keep 1,000 rounds for every caliber. And you ought to have a minimum of 3 or 4 magazines for every firearm, because magazines break, they stop making your brand of firearm. You can kind of always get that magazine at a place called Numerich, or better yet, eGun Parts. I think it's www.egunparts.com. If you've got a gun from 1850 to 1950 to today, I mean, if you just need, that little deal, I can't think of what it's called right now. Odds are, if you keep watching that site, they'll have it. They're like these high-end car parts places where they catalog everything. You can sell them guns of yours that don't work. You just contact them if you've got contact them, ask them the way to send it. They strip your gun down into the parts, and because there are people always looking for parts to rebuild, or they've had a part break on an old gun. I bought plenty of little parts that I need, for certain guns, and they've gotten back in action. And I'm sure they're making a good living, because you may sell your gun to them for $100. And divide it up, they'll eventually sell it for 500. And instead of these cities doing this insane gun buybacks, which do not work, by the way, I would hope they would sell them to a place like that. But no, they destroy them, because I can hear the argument, well, all we're doing is helping guns be repaired so they can go ahead and kill people. People repairing guns are not going out and killing people. I mean, that's just a different breed of person that is repairing an old gun. I mean, it's a collector or whatever. But anyway, eGun Parts. If you have a 1972 rifle, 22 rifle, you can get the part there. If they don't have it today, they'll have it, and they have a schematic of that gun, and you can point to it, and it highlights itself, and they'll tell you how many parts they have in, and it's really fascinating. And it's the only place that does that. There are lots of places that sell, even eBay, sell used parts, but nobody that has them cataloged this way. A lot of places, we got parts for all, Remington shotguns. Call us. Well, if it's 9 at night and you're surfing the web, wouldn't you rather just click the schematic? Hey, yeah, they got it. You order it, and it comes in a few days. I mean, that's the way to go. Now, they've been around probably 60, 70 years. But they kind of got the system down now.
Well, while we're kind of getting close to wrap up here.
Let's one more toy.
Oh, yeah.
A completely legal machine gun that you can put together in no time at all. Now, notice it is unloaded, because I can stick my finger in there. That's right, camera's here. Now, what this is a slide fire stock on a Colt AR-15. And right now, it's just regular, acts regular. This is for right hand. You have to you click that, and you notice the piston type action. And because I'm paranoid, I'll check again. Yep. That's it in the magazine.
You have to have the magazine in for it to work?
Yeah, for me to show you, it's on safety. So what you do is you start off, you put your finger like that. Of course, that has to be up against my shoulder. The key to this is you have to kind of force it forward a little bit. But once it starts going, it's going like this.
It keeps pushing you forward.
Yeah, it is pushing the gas of the gun, is pushing it back. It's hitting your finger. It will fire at 750 rounds per minute, which is comparable to, any machine gun or any full auto. In other words, it emptied. I used a 40-round magazine. I think it emptied it in 3 seconds. You can, the more you practice it, the better you get. A lot of people say, well, you don't need anything like that. Well, listen, for $100, $150, you need that. This is plenty of fun. But you do need to practice it. It tends not to torque up like a regular full auto. It tends to push you back, which is good because you don't lose control, and it just doesn't have that force, to me anyway. And after getting used to it, you fire it 6 or 8 times, a couple hundred rounds, and at, let's say, 50 yards, you're pretty much hitting on a silhouette target. Then you got to practice firing, 6. The lowest number of rounds I could reasonably fire. Now I've got a real good trigger on that, a Timney trigger. I could maybe fire 5 rounds, 5-round burst, because you've got to just touch it. It's going off like that. I asked somebody one time, is it really worth, is putting a Timney trigger on AR-15, is that kind of like getting a $1,000 Bose speaker? Because my hearing's not good enough probably to recognize the difference. You'll recognize the difference. And no kidding. Now, it might be too crisp. It might be too sensitive for somebody. Some people might touch it and just go off, but you just got to realize that it's like a 3-pound pull as opposed to a scratchy 5.5-pound pull with this mil-spec trigger. But that's a 1984 Colt there that I've kind of gradually kept up with the times. And I've never had anything go wrong with it. And I'm not one of these people that cleans it every time I get home from shooting it. Okay, it looks like the Wicked Witch may be getting ready to kick us off the air. I think so. So 2 weeks from tonight is the 6th. I believe that's the 6th of July.
It is.
We'll be on the air then. We're going to try to be on there at the station the 4th. They don't want to be, the employees, but I'm still trying to pressure them to do that because, there are plenty of people that don't go to the beach, and there are plenty of people sitting around who like to listen to the show, I think. And I know on Matt Canovi's show, the gun show in Springfield a couple of years ago, it was on Saturday, and we did a live show on the 4th because I have a pretty good routine about the Declaration of Independence and guns that were used to protect our freedom. And one thing John Adams said is he hoped every year the signing of the Declaration was celebrated with bonfires, fireworks, with guns. And so it kind of worked into the whole thing. But, if that's the only day they have off, I may relax. But don't want to do that. I feel like it's our obligation. But anyway, stay tuned. 2 weeks from tonight is the 6th again. Same time. And Patreon, www.patreon.com/armedalabama. You get all the details there. I hadn't put the shirt picture or info on, but at the $10 level, you get the shirt info. But I think I may have put it on our Facebook page. We also need some more Facebook likes. So send out a ton of a lot of people will go there and just like a particular post, but won't ever bother liking the page. We're about to break 2,000 is the reason I'd like to get there. And we've got another website from another state that's a gun show, and they're 2,400, and we are so much more popular than them. We ought to have more likes than them. So we need to overtake them. So we need to get that done. But let's check. We'll have to check out the news, all of us, on two things. Keep up with the Ray, TENSING trial in Cincinnati, and then keep up with this shooting down on Dauphin Island Parkway and home invasion with the homeowner shooting 3 invaders. And that'll be interesting. But until July 6th, that's all. We'll see you then.
Click the end.